My name is Sarah, and I've always thought of my life as ordinary. I'm 27 years old and I've been a cab driver in London for the past 4 years. My routine felt comfortable, predictable even, nothing out of the ordinary. The bustling streets of Piccadilly Circus, the relentless traffic of Oxford Street, they were just part of my daily grind. I never felt lonely, especially after moving to a cozy apartment in Camden. It was close to everything: friends, work, and even a local cafe I'd visit on chilly winter mornings. That night, the sharp autumn wind was making its presence known, and the street seemed unusually deserted. Just another Wednesday. The city lights shimmered in the puddles left by the light rain, and the roads were quiet. It was shaping up to be an easy, peaceful night. Soft music played on the radio as I drove through the familiar streets doing what I did best, getting people from one place to another. Then the call came in. It wasn't common to get a request so late, but it seemed straightforward. Pick up a passenger in the East End near Shoreditch. That area had its quirks. Sometimes the shadows felt darker than they should. It looked calm enough, but something about it made my gut tighten. Maybe it was just a driver's instinct. When I arrived, a man stood on the curb, hooded, as if trying to shield himself from the world. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but his eyes seemed lost. I asked where he was. Headed, he replied in a flat, monotone voice without making eye contact. "St. Thomas's Hospital, please." His tone was cold, but nothing about it struck me as alarming, at least not at first. The music on the radio tried to maintain the tranquil vibe, but an unease crept in. As soon as he got in, the calm evaporated. The damp smell of rain mixed with something heavier, more oppressive. The air inside the car felt tense, almost stifling. Every sound seemed amplified: the hum of the engine, the occasional squeak of the windshield wipers. I couldn't ignore the way he kept his head down, unnecessarily low, as if avoiding being seen. The drive to the hospital felt interminable. The street stretched ahead, dark and empty, as though the city itself was holding its breath. My passenger was silent. Most of my fares made at least small talk, but this man sat like a shadow in the back seat. The quiet was unnerving. As we neared the hospital just a few blocks away, an overwhelming sense of dread gripped me. Something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my instincts were screaming. He started rummaging in the backpack he'd brought, his movements caught in the corner of my eye. Then abruptly he straightened up, placing the bag on his lap. The silence grew heavier, suffocating. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help glancing back. His eyes met mine, cold and piercing, sending a chill down my spine. There was an unspoken threat in the air. My instincts told me to pull over and run, but I couldn't. He didn't seem outwardly aggressive, but there was something undeniably wrong. It was as if even breathing near him was a mistake. And then he spoke. His voice, still monotone, now carried an edge that felt like a blade. "Have you ever felt like you were being followed?" The question caught me off guard, nearly making me lose control of the car. My breathing quickened. It was as if he could read my thoughts. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease, but the tension only grew. I was vulnerable, completely exposed. Just me and this man in a car, alone on London's dark streets. The radio, now faint, was a distant murmur. His presence felt overwhelming, like a shadow that refused to lift. Then he said something that froze me to my core. "Don't worry. I know you're watching me." My heart pounded. How did he know? I glanced at the rearview mirror and in a split second noticed a dark car tailing us, too close. Every turn I took, it followed. My hands tightened on the wheel. Something was very wrong. I accelerated, trying to shake the car behind me, but it stayed on my tail. The driver seemed aware of my every move. Panic clawed at my chest. I was trapped, with nowhere to go. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. "Stop running," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. You know what happens when people try to run. The city transformed into a maze of twisting streets and dark alleys. No lights, no life, just the suffocating weight of the night. The car chasing us remained relentless, matching my every maneuver. I couldn't tell if I was escaping or if the chase itself was part of their plan. Then, an unexpected turn. A broken traffic sign led me down the wrong street. Momentarily losing the other car, relief was short-lived. The man in the back spoke again, his tone colder than ever. "You're trapped." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. Out of nowhere, the pursuing car reappeared, pulling alongside me and blocking the road. There was no way out. The man in the back seat smiled, a slow, knowing grin. He'd anticipated this. I stopped the car, paralyzed with fear. The headlights of the other vehicle blinded me. Two men emerged, their faces blank, their movements deliberate. They yanked open my door, and before I could react, they were inside. No words were exchanged. Their eyes, devoid of emotion, locked on me. The man in the back seat stepped forward, his satisfaction chilling. I was surrounded. That night, silence was the loudest terror. When the engine was finally turned off, it felt like the entire city had gone quiet, waiting for what would come next. Everything happened so fast, but the fear, the helplessness, it's never left me. Who were they? What did they want? I'll never know. All I know is that they found me, and that was enough to change everything. The last thought I had before everything went dark was simple, yet horrifying. I should have never picked up that passenger. It was a Friday in October, one of those cold, rainy nights typical of Seattle. My shift at the restaurant had ended late, and all I wanted was to get home, curl up on the couch with a blanket, and watch a movie to unwind. My apartment was in a quiet area near Green Lake, where the sound of rain against the windows was usually the only noise I heard at night. I worked as a waitress, an exhausting job, but one that paid the bills. I'd been living alone since my last relationship ended, and while loneliness was a constant companion, the sense of control over my own life was comforting. As I drove through the wet streets, I noticed a taxi parked oddly, its headlights off. I didn't pay much attention. It was a busy night with Halloween parties happening all over the city. When I pulled into the garage at my building, something felt off. The street was quieter than usual, almost as if the air was heavy with something unexplainable. I brushed the feeling aside and headed upstairs, eager to leave the day behind. Little did I know the night was far from over. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my heart racing slightly from exhaustion. As I opened the door, the lights were off, just as I'd left them before heading to work. But something wasn't right. The uneasiness I'd dismissed earlier came rushing back, more tangible now. A chill ran down my spine as I glanced around, searching for anything out of place. Everything seemed untouched, but an eerie sensation settled over me. I tossed my bag onto the couch and sighed with relief, heading to the window to close the curtains. That's when I saw something strange. A car parked outside the building. It wasn't familiar. An old dark model with its headlights off, sitting there for what seemed like too long, unmoving, just waiting. I knew the regular cars in the neighborhood. This one didn't belong. My stomach tightened, but I told myself it was just paranoia. Still, I decided to lock all the doors and windows. Something inside me refused to ignore the creeping feeling of being watched. I was alone, and the silence in the apartment felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Trying to shake it off, I settled onto the couch, determined to relax. After all, it was just another night. Or so I thought. Lying on the couch, I tried distracting myself with the TV, but my mind couldn't escape the unease. The car was still there, visible through the window like a shadow that refused to disappear. The rain tapping against the glass only amplified my thoughts, each one more unsettling than the last. That's when I heard a noise from the hallway. At first I thought it was just the wind or the old pipes in the building, but the sound persisted. Footsteps. Someone was walking toward my door. My heartbeat quickened, adrenaline surging through me. The knocks were soft and deliberate, as if the person knew exactly where they were going. I froze, holding my breath. The footsteps dragged on, each one feeling slower than the last, stretching time itself. Suddenly, a firm knock on the door. My stomach churned. It was too late for visitors. I wasn't expecting anyone. Paralyzed, I didn't know what to do. Another knock, louder this time. Slowly, I crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. What I saw made my panic spike. The strange car was gone. I was alone, but the feeling of being watched had never been stronger. The knocking stopped, but now a faint dragging sound echoed in the hallway. Fear paralyzed me, yet something inside screamed for me to act. Taking a deep breath, I carefully approached the door, moving as silently as possible. My hands were clammy, trembling as I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. The silence was complete, broken only by the sound of my own shallow breaths. Summoning every ounce of courage, I swung the door open, glancing both ways down the corridor. No one was there, but as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. One of the hallway lights was out, casting the far end in darkness. The last, apartment directly below mine, seemed unnaturally dim. I could have sworn its light had been on earlier, but now, nothing. Dread clutched at my throat again. Something was very wrong. Acting on instinct, I retreated into my apartment, locking the door behind me. My hands shook so badly I fumbled with the lock. A suffocating sense of claustrophobia overwhelmed me as I scanned the room, half expecting the walls to close in. That's when I heard it. A thud. Something heavy slamming against the walls inside the apartment. It was muffled but forceful, as though someone were trying to break out, not in. My body went into full alert. The only option was to run, but where? I no longer trusted anything, or anyone. And then, silence. For a moment, the quiet stretched, pressing down on me like a weight, but it only amplified the tension in my chest. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, until the sound of the doorbell shattered the stillness. Once, twice, 3 times. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was trying to lure me out. I stepped back, retreating from the door. Instinct told me not to open it, not to give in. My eyes darted around the room, searching for answers, but there were none. My fear was all-consuming, my every cell on high alert, ready to flee. Desperate, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. Before the call could connect, the line went dead. A sharp, deliberate cut, as though someone had severed it on purpose. A chill ran down my spine. It felt as if everything was working against me. When I glanced at the mirror across the room, my reflection startled me so badly I almost stumbled. The front door was ajar. Just slightly, it hit me like a shockwave. Someone had come in. And now I wasn't just being watched. I wasn't alone. It was just another ordinary night in Chicago. I was driving home after a long day at work, exhausted but relieved to be heading back. The streets were quiet, almost deserted, and I decided to take the longer route home, as I often did when I needed some time to think in peace away from the city's noise. I drove through remote neighborhoods where the streetlights were sparse, casting deep shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. The only sounds in the car were the gentle hum of the engine and the low music playing on the radio. The stillness was comforting, yet as the night deepened, a subtle unease began to creep in. I couldn't pinpoint why, but something felt off. The wind howled, rustling the trees lining the road, and most houses looked abandoned, with only a few faint lights glowing. The silence was welcoming, yet strangely unsettling, as if something was lurking, ready to shatter the calm. As I drove down a narrower road, I noticed a car appear suddenly in my rearview mirror. At first, I wasn't alarmed. It wasn't unusual to encounter other drivers on less traveled routes. However, this car was different. It was far too close, tailing me much closer than it should have been. At first, I brushed it off, but as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The car stayed right on my tail, its headlights glaring into my mirror, nearly blinding me. I sped up slightly, hoping to create some distance, but the other car matched my speed perfectly. Turning left onto a familiar street, I thought I could lose it, but the car turned too. My stomach sank. What was going on? Was this just a coincidence, or something more sinister? The anxiety grew with every passing second. The feeling of being followed became impossible to ignore. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. The car's relentless presence loomed behind me, and my breathing quickened. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but it was hard to shake the heavy, ominous weight settling on my shoulders. Each twist and turn I made, the car followed, mirroring my movements with an eerie precision. It wasn't in a rush or erratic. It was calculated, deliberate, as if the driver knew exactly where I was headed. My mind raced, desperate for answers that wouldn't come. A larger, better-lit street lay ahead, and I pinned my hopes on reaching it to escape this unsettling encounter. But when I checked the rearview mirror again, my heart skipped a beat. The car wasn't just following anymore, it felt like its driver was watching me. I couldn't see who was inside, but I knew deep down that I was being observed. That chilling realization made my skin crawl. I tried slowing down, weaving slightly, hoping the other car would move on, but it didn't. Instead, it stayed impossibly close, unwavering in its pursuit. Then something unexpected happened. The car suddenly overtook me, speeding past in a move so abrupt it startled me. Relief washed over me. Maybe it was over. But as I glanced to the side, my relief turned to horror. In the car's back seat, silhouetted against the headlights, was a figure. It didn't move or react. It just sat there, perfectly still, staring directly at me, even from a distance. The figure's presence sent a shiver down my spine. Something was deeply wrong. The car pulled ahead and came to an abrupt stop in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes, my pulse pounding as I tried to catch my breath. The silence around me was deafening, yet inside, my thoughts were a chaotic storm. Suddenly, my car door was yanked open with terrifying force. I jolted forward, heart racing, trying to process what was happening. Turning, I saw a woman standing by my car. Her face was calm, expressionless, almost lifeless. She didn't say a word, didn't seem to notice me. Instead, she stepped away from the car, walking slowly into the darkness, as though in a trance. I tried calling out to her, but she didn't respond. My breathing quickened and fear began to consume me. I looked back at the mysterious car. It was now parked in the middle of the street, headlights still glaring. What terrified me most was the figure in the back seat. It was gone. The absence was louder than any scream. This wasn't a coincidence. I was at the center of something far beyond my understanding. My phone vibrated, shattering the oppressive silence. A single message lit up the screen. "Turn around." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Frozen in place, I knew exactly what it meant. I wasn't just a random driver that night. I was prey. My chest tightened as I grappled with what to do, knowing that every second counted. But before I could react, movement caught my eye. A shadow flickered to my right, and my heart stopped.